I'm in my zone.
Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for F1 Race Stars, which released back on November 13th in the US, or the 16th if you're in the UK. The title features 12 teams that consist of 24 drivers, most of which started in the real 2012 Formula 1 season, with a couple fictitious teams tossed in for good measure. And I'm not going to be doing my typical structured review for this one, but I have an awful lot to say about it, and I've also formed a pretty strong opinion about it as well. Now, before I begin, I have to mention two things. I only played about half of the career mode, and I wasn't able to get an online match going because there just wasn't one available during the week when I searched. However, there are stats showing that some online racing has been taking place, so maybe I was just searching at bad times or just got unlucky, but either way, let's go ahead and get into this review. For starters, the graphics are bright and colorful, the tracks look nice, and most of which have a great overall design to them. Sometimes the camera will begin motioning sideways as you're going into steep turns, which added a nice touch. However, the driver faces during the cutscenes look like you could shred cheese across their face, and to me they just look a little creepy. But this title isn't about cutscenes, it's about kart racing, and while it does hit the mark with some aspects, it fails pretty hard on others. Let's talk about the frustrating parts first, which is a big reason why I didn't finish the career mode before doing this review. It doesn't matter what class that you select, whether it's 1000cc, 2000cc, or 3000cc, whatever driver the computer has in first place during the race is just an absolute beast. I mean, there were some races that I didn't make any mistakes and it felt like I did pretty well, only to cross the finish line in second place and see that the computer driver in first finished the race 10 and even sometimes 15 seconds faster than me, and that happened time and time again. Even at my best, the computer would seem to always find some way to get into first place and leave me into second, and I had no problem finishing in second place regardless of the class that I was racing in. In fact, the majority of my races ended with me in second place, but in the career mode, when you're doing the circuits, it was usually a different computer driver finishing in first every single time. So even when I was finishing in second or third, I was still able to gold medal the event without too much trouble, as long as I was consistently placing into the top 3 or 4 during each event. Maybe Codemasters purposely designed it this way so that it would be more rewarding when you do win, but I felt kind of helpless trying to catch the first place driver in a lot of these races because he just doesn't leave any room for error whatsoever. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get the "oh, you just suck" comments, but I've played a lot of kart racers over the years and I've never had this much of a problem beating the computer and coming into first place, especially after replaying the same event and practicing on the same 11 tracks over and over again. Which leads me into the next topic. There's only 11 tracks unless you buy the $5 DLC to add another one. Even with multiple routes on each track, those 11 still got old pretty fast. Most of the tracks have 2-minute lap times, so you have to average it out one lap around each track and you've seen the entire game in less than a half of an hour. This wouldn't be so bad if the kart racing was just super exciting, but here again lies another problem. This is the first kart racer that I've played that you can't drift around the corners. I mean, that's almost blasphemy in the kart racing genre. Another huge issue that I had with this game was the actual star boost that you pick up on the track as you're racing. There is one in particular that teleports you around the track, like way up ahead, and it's only given to those towards the back of the pack. Typically this isn't that big of a deal, and a lot of kart racers have this, but when you're on the final lap approaching the finish line and you have a computer player teleport out in front of you to cross the finish line in first or second at the last moment, you may want to announce to anybody that may be sitting nearby while you're playing to just be prepared to dodge flying objects across your living room, especially after a 5 or 6 minute race had just taken place. And on the flip side, when you're doing poorly in a race, it just feels really cheap to go from 8th or 9th and then just magically you're all of a sudden in first place. It's almost an incentive to do poorly so that you get that power up so that you can zip ahead of everybody else. That one just was a bit of a deal breaker for me, and I checked out 2 other major reviews for this game and they both mentioned very frustrating AI. Another issue with career mode is you always start in the back of the pack, and the computer almost always gets a super head start with the boost at the beginning of the race, so if you miss out and don't get a boost as well, you're automatically going to be playing catch up for the rest of the event in most cases, which some events that rewards the player that's in first place for collecting objects or whatever the case may be, this can mean the difference between winning and losing before you ever really even get a chance to do anything in the race. Now, going back to the previous topic about drifting, yes, I understand that it has an F1 license and you don't drift in the F1 racing, but with this style of gameplay and with it being a kart racer, it desperately needed a drift button, or at least some sense of drifting when braking. Speaking of the braking, you really have to slow down before you ever get into a turn, and since the cars don't accelerate all that fast unless you hit a boost pad, this really tones the entire experience down a notch. And it also seems like the computer doesn't have to slow down as much to hit the same type of turn, so that again was also somewhat frustrating. The game does hold a few bright spots though that are worth pointing out. The entire career mode can be played in local co-op, which is always a welcome addition to any racing game. The career mode has some variety in it, such as collecting things on the track or passing through colored gates for points. There's a lot of different types of events, so they did do a good job with mixing things up a little bit. Each team that you select between has a different perk or boost that alters the gameplay in some way. None of them really made a huge impact on the actual racing as far as I could tell. Now, I don't use the word dislike very often in my reviews, but I dislike this title because of its cheap AI and the lack of tracks and just the overall way that everything was set up on here. If it had more tracks to race on, or if the computer would scale its difficulty based on the class that you're racing in, then I may have warmed up a little bit more to this game. But if you think the game looks fun, there is currently a free trial for PlayStation Plus members if you wanted to check it out. Of course, if you're watching this video months down the road, this may no longer be an option, but even with an initial $40 budget price point, it's not a game that I can recommend picking up. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.